Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Jenny Bayliss to talk more about her latest novel, Kiss Me at Christmas. Kiss Me at Christmas introduces us to Harriet Smith, a single mother whose holiday spirit has waned over the years. When her college-age daughter chooses to spend Christmas in Manhattan, Harriet contemplates a wine-soaked one-night stand to cope with her loneliness. However, her plans take an unexpected turn when she ends up taking the fall for students caught trespassing in the town's old winter theater. So to make amends, Harriet is tasked with directing the theater's final Christmas performance, which leads her to collaborate with a charming local actor. Readers, you can expect a warming tale of second chances, community spirit, and rediscovering the magic of the holiday season. But before we get into today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review if you love the show. Alrighty, thanks in advance. And now onto the episode with author Jenny Bayliss. Hi friends, hi readers. Welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me to talk about Kiss Me at Christmas is author Jenny Bayliss. Hi Jenny, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Hi Victoria, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I'm thrilled to have you on. Can't wait to talk about Kiss Me at Christmas and all things holidays. But I know this isn't your first novel, far from. But how are you feeling about this one, that Kiss Me at Christmas is now out and available for readers?
I am very excited. It always feels like a massive honor that I actually get to write books, because I wanted to do it for so long and it just didn't seem like that was in the cards for me. I did lots of other jobs, and so even though this is my 5th book, I still can't quite believe it. And obviously, imposter syndrome is a real thing. Every time a book comes out, I'm so grateful. And then I'm obviously so terrified. You're so excited that you've written this book and it goes out into the world, and then you're terrified that everyone's going to hate it. So it's one of those things where you have all the emotions.
Yes, I can't even imagine it, but I'm sure there are folks listening who can relate, especially folks who have creative pursuits. Imposter syndrome is real. You're excited, but you're nervous. Are they going to like it? But I dare say, I think readers are going to love Kiss Me at Christmas. So I want them to hear it straight from you before we talk about the characters a bit more. Tell us about your novel. What's your elevator pitch? What can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
So really, it focuses on Harriet. So Harriet has become an empty nester, essentially. Her daughter, her only daughter, who's 17, went on an exchange trip, a school trip, and she was gone for 3 weeks. And Harriet was thinking, it's fine, she'll be back before Christmas, everything will be fine. And then her daughter rings and says, great news, the family have said they want me to stay for Christmas. And then that's it, Christmas is cancelled. She can't believe it. She's already struggling. She's worrying about what's going to happen when Maisie goes to uni next year. So anyway, so obviously she goes out and gets drunk because she's drowning her sorrows, and she makes a dubious decision, and she has a one-night stand with a chap she meets in a bar, drinking far too much mulled wine. The next day she wakes up with a wicked hangover, goes to work to find that she's the pastoral care leader in a school, goes to work to find that 5 of her students, called the famous 5 because they're always truanting, have gone AWOL again. So off she goes out to find her students, and she follows them into a sort of a derelict theatre, and then they get caught by the police, and she takes the fall for her students because she thinks, oh my God, they're already in so much trouble. They don't need any more. So she takes the fall for them. She gets taken to the police station. The theatre owner, her solicitor, to come and speak to Harriet, and it's none other than the gentleman that she had the one-night stand with. So there's that. So she feels quite awkward about that. And things just get worse, because then she gets bribed by the theatre owner, who says, you made a mess, you've got to clean it. And she says, I didn't make any mess. But the kids were just in there. They weren't making a mess. It's been a mess for years. You haven't done anything with it. And the theatre woman, Eveline Winter, she says, no, you have to do it. And so kind of cunningly thinks, okay, if I'm going to be cleaning up the theatre anyway, let's see if we can have a community space. I'll ask for one little corner of her empire that we can use for the community, have a youth club, keep these kids out of trouble. Eveline Winter is a clever woman, and she says, actually, I've been trying to sell the theatre, and what would be great is if you could put on a Christmas production for me that would sell it basically to all these theatre magnates that are coming to look at the theatre. And if there's a production on, that'll be great. That will help me sell it. And basically, and she says, so you can either do that or go to prison. And Harriet's like, okay. So she ends up, I'm blathering, but she ends up having to put on a Christmas production with her students. And in the meantime, the local community centre has closed. And so all these kind of orphaned community groups keep winding up at the theatre and saying, oh, we heard you've got some space. And before you know it, she's got like she's got a village basically in an old theatre, and she's trying to manage her job and manage this, and sexy James, who is growing on her as time goes on. So that's the basis of it.
Lots of fun and lots of shenanigans. And I love the theatre bit. I love that everyone ends up there some way, somehow. And who doesn't love a holiday play, a Christmas play, especially during the season? So let's chat a bit about James, who turns out to be the lawyer who was her one night stand, and he's growing on her. Tell us about his character, because he was also going through some stuff as well when they connected.
Yes, so he's navigated his life he's been very career oriented, and he's always he's only had himself to look after. So he really has only had to worry about his own interests. He knows that Eveline Winter, the person that he works for, has maybe some slightly shady deals on the side, but he turns a blind eye, and sort of Harriet picks him up on this. She's like, that's not how we do things. So he has to really bow to Harriet's way, really, and he gets to know these kids because he's got no contact with children before, really. And down the line, we find out that he's harboring this dreadful guilt that he had a child that he didn't know that he had until she was in her 20s. And now he's dealing with all this. He's got 24 years of guilt from not being there, not being present in her life. So he's got all this he's like trying to make amends in lots of ways. And he and Harriet, they clash in lots of ways, because she's obviously always defending her students who were a bit naughty, and he can't understand teenagers. And so there's lots of back and forth, but the attraction between them is undeniable, and they will come to find that they have more in common than they have differences.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I've noticed a trend. You've been doing some holiday themed books. I really enjoy them. It's something I look forward to at this time of the year. Tell us about your inspiration for Kiss Me at Christmas specifically. Like, where did the idea or the spark come from to write a story about a woman who's like almost an empty nester? Like, it's happening, but also pairing her with a character who also has his guilt about not being there for his child, and the theatre and just all the shenanigans involved.
I think Harriet's at a really interesting stage in her life, and I think as women we do tend to get a little bit looked over. We hit our 40s, maybe our children start to get a little bit older, and some of us are empty nesters, and I think that's a really people, because we've had all this time where we've dedicated our lives to our children. We do other things, obviously we work and we keep house and we look after our children and we do all the sports events and all that kind of stuff, and then all of a sudden they go to university or they leave home and you're like, oh, and I think that's a shocker. So I really wanted to come at this from the point of view of a woman who, as I am an empty nester myself, as someone who experiencing that for the first time, how she learns that actually, as much as you've been mum and employee and all of these other things, chef, chauffeur, you are also you, and you are allowed to just cook yourself a nice meal. You're allowed to take yourself out for dinner. I realize all these things were around food, but you are allowed to do nice things for yourself. And I think as women especially, we forget that we are entitled to do nice things for ourselves too. And so I think that's really where Harriet came from, and that all mixed in with a book that I read every year. I mean, I'm mad on Christmas, which is probably evident from the fact that I just keep writing Christmas books, but I love A Christmas Carol. I've always loved the book A Christmas Carol, and I listen to it every year. I used to read it every year, And then I discovered that there is an audio edition read by Hugh Grant. Now, who doesn't want Hugh Grant to read you A Christmas Carol? It was in my mind, and I wanted to build this story around a modern day, because I think the story still stands of A Christmas Carol. We always focus on Scrooge and his personal redemption, but the whole point of the story was to shine a light on areas of the community that weren't having any attention paid to them, that were struggling. And this is just a modern day version of that, really. You've got kids who are living on the breadline. People are struggling, people are lonely, there's all sorts of things that bring these people together. And that was the community that I wanted to build that around at Christmas, especially.
I love that. I have to be honest, I am searching for the Hugh Grant narration Christmas Carol, because I do revisit it almost every year. I won't say every year. I do read letters from Father Christmas, letters throughout every year. That I do. However, now I'm interested in an audiobook version of A Christmas Carol by Hugh Grant. It's on Audible, everyone. If you're listening, I found it. It's on Audible. So that's really exciting. But I want to stick on the theme of Christmas and holidays because, like you said, obviously you love it. Because you've written 4 previous books, The 12 Dates of Christmas, A Season for Second Chances, Meet Me Under the Mistletoe, A December to Remember, again, all revolving around the holidays in some way, shape or form. Outside of the holiday theme, what would you say is another common thread that runs throughout your novels? But also, what is something that's different too?
That's interesting, because I think if you write Christmas books especially, I think you have to be careful that you don't, it would be hard, I think, to always write a sparkly Christmas book, if you feel what I mean. There's only so many times you can write that. So what I try and do is have, obviously they're rom-coms, so fun, but I try and have people that are characters real and who have a bit of baggage. And I think one of the themes running through all of my books is that all my characters have baggage. Some have more than others. And more often than not, they're women, again, in their late 30s, 40s. By that time, we do have baggage. So I think what I try and do is bring a normal person with their normal story, but set it at Christmas, if that makes sense. Because I do think that as well, there is a lovely atmosphere and people are kinder. And I think if you are going to have sort of a redemption story, then it's quite nice to have it at Christmas. I guess that's...
No, it's a good idea. I agree. Because we are a bit softer, and I know it's a super busy time, super busy. I'm always busy. However, we also slow down in a way, especially as we get closer to the holidays, after the holidays. It's a good time for us to look at the people around us, reevaluate our lives. And yeah, we see folks, this all happening during Christmas and during the holidays. So yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, I want to know about you and your holiday traditions, though. You mentioned A Christmas Carol, that's a staple. What else would you say is a tradition you have to do? Maybe something, an activity, or decorating, food or drink? What are some of the staples in your life during the holidays?
They grow, don't they, over time, and they grow with your families, depending on. So when the kids were small, every year we would do a craft, sort of a slightly dodgy toilet roll, Father Christmases, that sort of thing, or making a stocking, which I still use for them when they come home, that they made their stockings and they're diabolical, but they're beautiful at the same time. And so there were those kind of things. And then now things have shifted, but I would say I always make mince pies, and I always make far too many, and I stash them in the freezer. And so that is something that happens every year. I've got a thing about snowballs, which is the Advocaat and lemonade. I don't know why, but that says Christmas to me. So I drink a lot of those, and it's really the only time I drink alcohol as well. So it's like Christmas is like happy days. And what else? When the kids come home, because they've left home now, so when they come home, or one or both of them, with or without partners, we try and all sit down and watch National Lampoon's Christmas. And we've now seen it for many years, but I guess because we only watch it once a year, and it just is always us together. And so that sort of makes it funny. I'm trying to think of all the things. I do decorate the house, like there's more is more, I would say, is my aesthetic for Christmas. I love that. No minimalism.
Yes, I love that. That sounds super fun. Getting into your reading life, what was the last book or handful of books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend?
I've got a couple actually that have really stayed with me that I've read within the last few months. So the first one is The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. And that was it's a dystopian. So the way it's written, it could either be a sort of a tiny village, either way back in the past or in a dystopian future. But either way, it's an isolated village. And when the girls of the village hit 16, in their 16th year, all the girls are rounded up and sent away to this forest where they have to live for a year. And it's called the Grace Year. And the idea is that they get rid of their dangerous powers. So there's this idea, it's a very patriarchal system, and men are firmly in charge. Women have no voice and they have no say in anything. And I think, basically, it's women that of a certain, like women at 16 or girls at 16, if they might get a bit bolshy, they call it their dangerous magic. So they basically send them away. And all these girls, and the rule is that no girl who comes back, so every year, generation goes away, they come back and they are dramatically changed. They are meek, they are mild, they are subservient. And they've lost weight, they look terrible, they've got hair missing. But the rule is that nobody is ever allowed to tell anybody else about the Grace Year. So no girl is ever warned before she goes in. And it's an incredible book because it's got that mean girl mentality as well, because you've got the girls together and you really realize that actually what's happening here is that the girls are their own worst enemies. And if all it would take is for one generation of girls to say, actually, this is going to happen, or just pay forward a little bit of kindness, but they're not, because they're not allowed to. This cycle of it just goes on and on. So anyway, that blew my mind. That was a great book. And then another one, which is completely different, which is called The Twilight Garden by Sarah Nisha Adams, which is that's set on two timelines. And it's about neighbours who have a shared garden. And there's neighbours in the 60s, and they become friends, and they grow this beautiful garden. It becomes a community garden. And then over the years, that sort of falls by the wayside. Different people come and go. And then years later, a chap called Winston moves into one of the houses. Somebody moves into the house next door, and he suddenly gets delivered on his doormat of the garden that is now just a ruin. And slowly he starts to bring the garden back to life, and he gets to know his neighbor, and they get the community involved. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's heartwarming. It's everything you want from a sort of restorative book. So those are two that really blew my mind recently. I could go on.
I love the recommendations. That's awesome. And again, I know your holiday read is A Christmas Carol audio by Hugh Grant, which is something I'm now excited for. But we also love indie bookstores here on this show. So share with our listeners some of your favorite local indies.
So we have in Folkestone, which is, because obviously I'm in the UK, so we have the Folkestone bookshop, which is just so much more than a bookshop. Obviously it's a bookshop, but it's just they're always, you can just go in there and have a cup of tea and read, or it's a safe space. You can go there, people go there and do crafting. It's just welcoming. It's so wonderful. And then there's another one, which although I haven't been in person, I have ordered from there, and I follow them on Instagram, which is called Mostly Books. And that is in Abingdon, which is in Oxfordshire. And then there's another one, which is not local to me, but it is an indie bookshop, and it's called Mountain Coffee Shop and Bookstore, and it's in the middle of the Scottish Highlands. And it was such a surprise when I found it, because we were on holiday and we was in the middle of the Highlands, and I was gasping for a coffee. And then not only did we find somewhere that sold beautiful coffee and the most amazing cakes, but also was a bookshop. And it was just like when you just find an oasis. And I was like, what? So yes, that's amazing. I think it's in Gairloch. It's in Gairloch in Scotland, in the Highlands.
That is so amazing. You sold me at like tea and cakes and in a bookshop. Oh my gosh, that's my favorite. That's my favorite. Really good way to relax. Okay, getting back to your book now, Kiss Me at Christmas. Again, I know you've done your job. It's, in my opinion, another fabulous holiday read. But what are you hoping for in an ideal world that readers might think or feel or want to pick up the phone and call a friend after they've turned the last page?
I think I would really like people to feel uplifted. I think that's probably the main thing. I want people, to feel uplifted, to feel positive, that change is possible, that kindness is a great thing. I think just all of those things. I want people to feel like they've had a little experience of something lovely, is what I say. It's not dark. Spoiler alert, my books are going to be happy endings. And I want people to take a moment away from, like you were saying earlier, the busy schedule of Christmas, because we're so busy. Just take a moment for yourself, read a book, and then afterwards feel like, oh, lovely. That's what I'd like.
Jenny, thank you so much for stopping by and speaking with me. This has been fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.